On a lonely plain in southern England stand giants of silent stone. They cast shadows that measure seasons, echo hammer blows from 4,000 years ago, and whisper of people who moved mountains without wheels. What story could circle so many suns and still keep its center hidden? Today at the Deep Dive, we trace the timeline of Stonehenge, an engineering saga carved in chalk, hauled across seas, and aligned with the sky itself. We're going to unpack, the layers of its history, the sheer ingenuity of its builders, and the cosmic connections embedded in its design. Get ready for a deep dive that busts some myths and hopefully ignites your curiosity about what made this ancient monument so vital and why it still captivates us today.
It really is fascinating, isn't it? When you realize Stonehenge isn't just one thing, but, well, a whole series of ambitious projects. It evolved over millennia, and tracing that journey really helped us get a handle on the people who shaped it.
Exactly. So let's start there with the timeline. We'll trace it through 3 big turning points, which reveal some pretty surprising origins.
Right. Our first major turning point, let's call it Era 1, takes us way back. We're talking between 3100 and 2950 BC. This was the earthwork stage. And yeah, the very first monument, it wasn't stone at all. It was this huge circular earthwork enclosure.
An earthwork, so literally dug out of the earth.
Precisely. They dug this massive circular ditch, maybe 100 meters across, using really simple tools.
Like what kind of tools? We're talking pre-metal.
Oh, yeah. Deer antler picks, mainly. Animal bones. Basic stone tools. And with those, they dug the ditch and piled up the chalk they removed to form these inner and outer banks, created 2 entrances. And this structure, this ditch and bank, that's an early form of what archaeologists call a henge.
Okay, a henge. Got it. So a big circular enclosure made of earth.
Yep. And inside the ditch, they dug a ring of 56 pits. We know them as the Aubrey Holes, named after John Aubrey, who spotted them centuries later. These pits probably held timber posts initially, maybe even some early standing stones. We're not entirely sure.
But what was this first earthwork phase used for?
Well, this is remarkable. For several hundred years, it served as a cremation cemetery. We've found human remains, animal bones, grave goods, all in the ditch and in those Aubrey Holes. It actually makes it Britain's earliest known large-scale burial ground, a really significant sacred place for burying the dead.
Wow. So Stonehenge began life as essentially a huge cemetery.
For a long time, yes. And then, interestingly, the sources suggest it was sort of abandoned for maybe 500 years.
Centuries. That's a long gap.
It is. But what's also fascinating is there's evidence of even earlier activity on this spot. Mesolithic stuff, maybe 8,500 to 7,000 BC. They found pits where large pine posts stood almost like totem poles.
Really? That far back? Is there a connection?
We don't know for sure if it's directly linked to the later Stonehenge builders, but it definitely shows this particular piece of land, this plain, held deep significance for people for a very, very long time.
That sense of place over millennia.
Okay, so after the abandonment, what next? That brings us to Era 2, our second major turning point. This is where things get dramatic. Around 2550 BC, maybe lasting till 2000 BC, the site is completely transformed. This is when the iconic central stone settings start to appear.
The ones everyone pictures.
Exactly. And this required, well, an immense effort. Hundreds of people, highly organized, a massive undertaking.
Right, and this is where the stones themselves come in. 2 main types you mentioned.
That's right. First, you have the blue stones. Now, they're called that because they take on a bluish hue when they're wet or freshly broken. They're smaller than the really big ones, but still substantial rocks. And the incredible thing about them is their journey.
This is the part that always blows my mind. Where did they come from?
They were quarried and then transported. I'd get this. Around 200 to 250 kilometers. That's roughly 125 to 150 miles.
150 miles. Hauled over land or by water or bit.
Likely a combination, but think about the logistics. All the way from the Presley Hills in West Wales.
West Wales. Incredible.
Yeah.
And we know exactly where.
We do now, yeah. Geological research has pinpointed specific quarry sources like Craig Rossi Phelan and Carn Godog. It's amazing detective work.
Just staggering. Okay, so those are the blue stones. What about the big ones? The giants.
Ah, yes, the Sarsens. These are the megaliths people really associate with Stonehenge. Huge blocks of sandstone. We're talking up to 50 tons each. Some are around 30 feet long. Absolute monsters.
50 tons. And where did they come from? For a long time, people thought they were local, right?
That was the assumption, yeah. Maybe from the Marlborough Downs nearby. But recent science geochemical analysis has changed the picture. They actually analyzed core samples drilled from one of the stones, Stone 58, I think it was.
Like DNA testing for rocks?
Sort of, matching the chemical fingerprint. And it confirmed that 50 out of the 52 Sarsens, including the famous heel stone outside the main circle, they were hauled approximately 25 kilometers, about 15 miles, from a place called Westwoods in Wiltshire.
Okay, 15 miles. Still a massive effort for 50-ton stones, but not quite Wales.
Definitely not Wales, but still a huge logistical challenge. And it tells us something important. They were bringing stones from different specific distant locations, Wales and Wiltshire.
Right, a deliberate choice. So they get these massive Sarsens and their well-traveled bluestones to the site. How did they arrange them?
This is where the classic Stonehenge shape emerges. The Sarsens were erected to form that iconic outer circle. Originally, it would have been 30 uprights. And incredibly, they were capped by 30 lintels, horizontal stones forming a continuous ring on top.
A complete stone circle with a roof, almost.
Almost, yeah. And inside that, they built an inner horseshoe shape using 5 trilithons.
Trilithons, that's a word for the 2 uprights with 1 stone across the top, like giant archways.
Exactly, those classic 3-stone structures, 5 of them in a horseshoe opening toward the northeast.
And the bluestones, where did they fit in?
They were set up between the outer Sarsen circle and the inner trilithon horseshoe, initially in a kind of double arc arrangement, although, as we'll see, their position changed later.
Okay, so this is the grand construction phase. But what was happening culturally at this time? Were these the same people who built the earthwork?
That's a really crucial point. This period, around 2400 BC onwards, sees significant cultural shifts happening across Britain. You get the arrival of new pottery styles, what we call beaker pottery, coming in from continental Europe. Also, the first signs of metalworking, bronze tools.
The Bronze Age is beginning.
Right, and genetic evidence, this is quite startling, suggests a near-complete replacement of the earlier Neolithic farming population by these incoming beaker people between about 2500 and 2200 BC.
Whoa, wait. A near-complete replacement.
The genetics seem to point that way. It suggests a major migration event, so the final grand stone phase of Stonehenge. It probably wasn't built just by the descendants of the original earthwork builders. It might have been constructed by, or at least heavily involved, these newcomers. Maybe it represents an early fusion of these different cultures collaborating on this immense project.
That adds a whole new layer. A monument possibly built during a time of huge societal change and migration.
Exactly. It complicates the narrative in a fascinating way.
Okay, so that takes us to about 2000 BC. What happens next? Does the building stop?
Not entirely. This brings us to Era 3, our final main phase, revisions and reach, roughly from 2000 down to about 1100 BC. A couple of hundred years after those main Sarsen structures went up, they started rearranging the bluestones again.
The smaller Welsh stones, why rearrange them?
We don't know the exact reasons, but they clearly felt the need to tweak the design. They were moved into a circle first, then later into an inner oval shape, and finally, they ended up in the horseshoe shape we see traces of today, inside the Sarsen horseshoe.
Constant refinement. And what about those massive Sarsen lintels, the ones forming the outer ring? How do they stay up? Just balanced?
Oh no, much more sophisticated than that. This is where the engineering just blows you away. They lock them in place using techniques borrowed straight from woodworking, but scaled up for stone.
Woodworking techniques. On 50-ton rocks.
Yep. Mortise and tenon joints, where a peg, the tenon, on one stone slots into a hole, the mortise, on another, and tongue and groove joints where a ridge slots into a channel.
Like giant stone Legos.
Pretty much. It's incredibly precise work. Laser scans have shown just how skilled they were. The scans even revealed that the lintels weren't perfectly straight, they were subtly curved.
Curved? Why?
So that when you stood back and looked at the completed circle, it appeared perfectly circular to the human eye. They were compensating for perspective distortion.
That's incredible attention to detail, an optical illusion built in stone.
And more than that, they also graded the heights of the upright Sarsens very carefully to disguise the natural slope of the land. So the tops of the lintels looked level, even though the ground wasn't. Master builders, absolutely.
They really were thinking about the aesthetics, the visual impact, weren't they?
Clearly, it wasn't just about plunking stones down, it was architecture, it was design.
And during this later period, what else was happening?
Well, the avenue, that long ceremonial path leading away from Stonehenge, was extended. It eventually stretched about 3 kilometers, linking the monument directly down to the River Avon.
Suggesting processions, maybe? A journey to or from the river.
That's the strong implication, yeah. A formal approach route. And then there's a really recent Quite mind-blowing discovery from just 2024 concerning the altar stone.
The altar stone. The big flat one lying inside the horseshoe. I thought that was a blue stone from Wales, too.
That's what everyone thought for ages. It's different sandstone, but assumed to be part of the Welsh consignment. But this new study completely changes that. It turns out the altar stone, this 6-ton slab, its geological fingerprint doesn't match Wales at all. It matches rocks in northeast Scotland.
Scotland. You're kidding. How far is that?
It reroutes its journey to somewhere around 460 to 500 miles.
500 miles. How do they even figure that out?
Its unique composition. It's a pale green micaceous sandstone, quite unusual, and it has a distinctively high level of barium. That specific chemical signature was the key. They matched it using a huge database of rock samples.
Wow. Wow. From Scotland. What does that mean?
It fundamentally reshapes our understanding of connectivity in prehistoric Britain. It suggests an island-wide network, cooperation, transport systems, far more sophisticated and widespread than we previously imagined. People moving these significant objects vast distances.
Wales, Wiltshire, Scotland,
Yeah.
all contributing stones to this one monument. That's extraordinary.
It really is. It hints at alliances, shared beliefs, maybe pilgrimage routes covering the entire island.
Okay. And were there any other changes in this final era?
Later on, around 1800 to 1500 BC, 2 mysterious rings of pits were dug outside the stone circle called the Y and Z holes. The thinking is they might have been intended for yet another rearrangement of the stones, perhaps the blue stones again, but it seems this plan was never completed. The holes were left empty.
So a project started and then abandoned. More questions.
Always more questions. And we also find evidence of later activity, like Bronze Age graffiti carved onto the stones.
Graffiti, like ancient tagging.
Sort of. Carvings of daggers and axe heads, dated to around 1800 BC. It shows the monument continued to be important, a place people interacted with long after the main construction phases were over.
Okay, so that timeline gives us a framework. Earthworks and burials, then the massive stone construction with materials from Wales and Wiltshire, possibly by new groups of people, and then centuries of revisions, refinements, and reaching out even further to Scotland.
That's the essential story in 3 acts, yes. A monument constantly evolving over nearly 2,000 years.
Which brings us back to the how. I mean, how on earth did they pull this off? Forget the myths of giants or Merlin waving a wand.
Right. The science reveals something arguably even more incredible. Human ingenuity, organization, and sheer hard work.
But the tools they had, you mentioned antler picks, that's it.
Pretty much the basics, yes. Antler picks for digging chalk, stone hammers, basically heavy rocks used for pounding. And we found specialized stone wedges at the quarries, probably used to help split the rocks. Critically, they were working without the wheel, as far as we know.
No wheel for moving 50-ton stones.
Doesn't seem like it. And no iron tools either. This is Neolithic and early Bronze Age technology. It's Stone Age engineering on a pharaonic scale.
It really feels like they didn't just move stones, they drafted geometry onto the horizon.
And did it with a toolkit fit for a garden shed. It's astonishing.
And the precision you mentioned earlier with the joints.
That scaled-up carpentry is just brilliant. Applying mortise and tenon, tongue and groove to multi-ton rocks. The accuracy needed is phenomenal. And we even see the human touch, the occasional mistake. There's one fallen lintel, I believe, that actually has 2 mortise holes carved into it. One is in the wrong place.
Huh. So even megalithic builders had off days.
Exactly. It's a fantastic reminder that these were real people facing immense challenges, learning, sometimes making errors, but achieving something extraordinary.
So how did they move those mountains? If not the wheel, then what?
We don't know for sure, of course, but the evidence and experiments suggest a combination of methods. Log rollers seem likely for moving the stones overland. Strong ropes, probably made from plant fibers or leather. Possibly A-frames or sheer legs for lifting.
And getting the lintels up on top of the uprights. That seems the hardest part.
2 main theories there, either building massive earthen ramps up against the uprights and hauling the lintels up the slope, or maybe constructing timber cribbing, like a gradually built-up platform of logs underneath the lintel, lifting it bit by bit. Both would require immense amounts of timber and labor.
Labor. You said hundreds, maybe thousands of people.
It must have been. Think about it. You don't just need the people hauling the stones. You need people quarrying them, people shaping them, people making the tools, people providing food and shelter for the workforce.
An entire support industry.
Absolutely. This points to a highly structured society, one capable of organizing, feeding, and housing a large, skilled workforce for extended periods, possibly seasonally, over generations.
And importantly, the evidence suggests this wasn't slave labor, right?
That's the current thinking, yes. The level of skill involved, the likely seasonal nature of the work fitting around farming cycles, the evidence of feasting nearby. It suggests a collaborative effort by communities who believed deeply in what they were doing. They must have had a powerful belief system and leaders capable of mobilizing immense resources and commanding loyalty, not just through force, but through shared purpose.
A society investing generations of effort into this single place.
Driven by something profound. And that engineering brilliance we touched on, the curved lintels, the graded heights.
That optical perfection.
Yes, confirmed by modern laser scans. It shows meticulous planning, foresight, and almost architectural blueprint applied to the landscape. It wasn't just brute force, it was intelligent design.
Painting with stone, as you said. Okay, from the engineering on the ground, let's look up. Stonehenge is famously connected to the sky, isn't it? A kind of sky scripture.
Oh, absolutely. The alignments are undeniable, particularly with the sun. That's probably its most famous feature.
The summer solstice sunrise.
That's the big one. On the longest day of the year, the sun rises in the northeast, and its first rays shine directly down the avenue through the main entranceway of the stone circle, passing just to the left of the heel stone. It creates this dramatic corridor of light right along the central axis of the monument.
And the winter solstice, the shortest day.
That's significant too. The winter solstice sunset aligns with the main axis in the opposite direction through the tallest central trilithon. And intriguingly, that setting sun would have illuminated the altar stone lying in the heart of the monument.
The stone that came from Scotland.
The very one. And we know from evidence at nearby Durrington Walls, a large settlement site, that there was major feasting happening around the time of the winter solstice. So this alignment seems tied to important midwinter rituals and gatherings.
Okay, so the sun is clearly key. What about the moon? Is Stonehenge a lunar calendar too?
Ah, the moon's role is... Well, it's more debated, more complex, but there are strong hints. The 4 station stones, they form a rectangle just inside the main earthwork bank. Their alignment seems to correlate with the extremes of the moon's movement across the sky.
Extremes, like how far north or south it rises and sets.
Exactly. Particularly relating to what's called the lunar standstill cycle. It's an 18.6-year cycle where the moon reaches its most northerly and southerly points on the horizon. The station stone rectangle seems to frame these positions.
18.6 years. That's quite specific.
It is. And even in the earliest phase, back with the Aubrey holes, analysis of where offerings were placed seems to show concentrations at points related to extreme lunar rising and setting points.
So maybe not a day-to-day calendar like ours.
Probably not, no. It's unlikely they were using it to track every single day. But it likely served as a broad seasonal marker. A way to anticipate the solstices, maybe the equinoxes, perhaps track these longer lunar cycles. Crucial information for ancient farming communities, right? Knowing when solstices occurred would help guide planting, harvesting, and probably just as importantly, the timing for major social gatherings and religious ceremonies.
And the location itself? Salisbury Plain, wide open skies, perfect for watching the heavens.
It must have been observed for millennia. This wasn't just building a structure, it was embedding astronomical knowledge, cycles of time, into the very landscape.
For the builders, then, these alignments weren't just practical timekeeping.
Likely much more than that. It seems they memorialized a profound connection between the Earth and the cosmos. A way of anchoring their world, their society, their rituals within the grand cycles of the sun and moon. It was about understanding their place in the universe, feeling part of something much larger than themselves. A sense of connection that perhaps we've lost somewhat in our modern, brightly lit cities.
That's a powerful thought. Okay, so it's an astronomical marker, a feat of engineering. But what was it for in terms of human activity? It seems like it served multiple purposes. Feasts, funerals, maybe even healing.
Absolutely. It wasn't just one thing. We already mentioned its earliest phase as Britain's first major cemetery. Finding up to 150 cremated individuals in the Aubrey holes and ditches, that's hugely significant. It was a place intimately connected with death and ancestors right from the start.
But not just a place of mourning. You mentioned feasting.
Right. The evidence from Durrington Walls, just a couple of miles away, is overwhelming. Huge mounds of animal bones, mostly pig, and vast amounts of pottery shards. Analysis suggests massive feasts were held there, particularly around the winter solstice, coinciding with that sunset alignment at Stonehenge itself. It points to Stonehenge being a focal point for large-scale communal celebrations, bringing people together from potentially far and wide.
Feasts and funerals. What about healing? Is there evidence for that?
This is really interesting. There's long-standing folklore associating the blue stones, the ones from Wales, with healing properties, magical stones, essentially. And intriguingly, some of the human remains found buried at or near Stonehenge show signs of illness or serious injury. People who had clearly suffered before death.
Like the Amesbury archer, wasn't he found nearby with injuries?
Exactly. He was buried a few miles away, but isotopic analysis of his teeth showed he grew up far away, possibly in the Alps region. He had a knee injury and dental problems. It fuels the theory that people might have undertaken long, arduous journeys, pilgrimages, effectively to Stonehenge, perhaps seeking cures from the perceived power of the stones or the place itself.
A prehistoric Lourdes, almost.
Perhaps. And the altar stone's alignment with the winter solstice sunset. That timing might also tie into rituals focused on renewal, regeneration, and healing during the darkest time of the year.
So cemetery, astronomical observatory, feasting site, healing center. It really sounds like a multi-purpose community hub.
A monumental one. And this brings us back to that idea of unity.
Right, the stones from Wales, Wiltshire, Scotland.
Exactly. Bringing materials from such diverse and distant parts of Britain strongly suggests collaboration, alliances, shared effort. It wasn't just one local tribe building their monument. The fact that people buried there also show origins from different parts of Britain reinforces this. It points towards Stonehenge serving as a unifying center, perhaps politically, perhaps religiously, perhaps both.
A place where different clans or groups came together, maybe forged alliances, through the shared work of building, through shared feasts, shared rituals under the same sky.
That's a very compelling interpretation, a monumental expression of community, connecting people to each other, to their ancestors, to the landscape, and to the cosmos. An incredible achievement of social cohesion as much as engineering.
It's truly astonishing how much more we understand now compared to, say, 50 years ago. Modern science seems to be constantly peeling back new layers.
It really is. The advances in archaeological science have been transformative for understanding Stonehenge. Take the sarsen origins, for example.
The geochemistry pinning them to West Woods.
Exactly. That forensic-style analysis pinpointed West Woods as the source for 50 of the 52 sarsens. But what's also intriguing is that two of the sarsens, Stone 26 and Lintel 160, I think they are, located at the northernmost points of their respective rings, they have distinctly different chemical signatures from the others.
So, not all from West Woods.
Apparently not. Their chemistry doesn't match West Woods, nor does it match other known sarsen sources nearby.
What could that mean?
Well, it opens up possibilities. Maybe they came from a different, as yet undiscovered source, or perhaps it hints at contributions from different groups of builders, maybe bringing their own stones from slightly different areas as part of the collaborative effort. More questions.
Always more questions. And building on that kind of scientific analysis, the altar stone discovery, tell us more about how science unlocked that.
That 2024 study was a brilliant piece of work. They used a technique called portable X-ray fluorescence, along with other analyses, to get a detailed chemical breakdown of the altar stone. The key was its unique combination of elements, especially that high barium content, combined with its specific mineralogy, the micaceous sandstone. They then compared this detailed fingerprint against a huge database of rock analyses from across the UK and Europe. And the only match they found was in a geological formation that outcrops in northeast Scotland.
So it wasn't just a guess based on appearance, it was hard chemical data.
Precisely. Hard data that completely rewrites the story of that stone and, by implication, the potential reach and capabilities of these prehistoric societies. A 500-mile journey for a 6-ton stone. It implies sophisticated transport, navigation, and social networks.
It really does feel like myths blame giants and druids, but science hands the credit fair and square to organized farmers with an incredible flair for logistics and engineering.
Absolutely. And the more data we drill, literally, in the case of stone cores, or figuratively with genetics and surveys, the more epic their resume grows.
Speaking of genetics, you mentioned the Beaker people migration. How does that fit in?
Genetic studies over the last decade have really illuminated this period around 2500 to 2200 BC. They show a massive influx of people into Britain associated with the Beaker culture, largely replacing the existing Neolithic farmer DNA pool. This coincides directly with that major stone building phase at Stonehenge. So it raises that fascinating question. Was Stonehenge a final flourish of the Neolithic world, or was it a project-driven or co-opted or perhaps even collaboratively built by these newcomers interacting with the remaining locals?
A monument born from cultural fusion, maybe?
It's a strong possibility. Perhaps it was a way to establish connections, demonstrate power, or even integrate the different groups through a shared monumental task. The genetics adds a whole dynamic human story to the stones.
And it's not just the stones themselves science is revealing, but the whole landscape around Stonehenge.
Oh, definitely. Techniques like ground-penetrating radar, GPR, magnetometry, aerial laser scanning, they're allowing us to see beneath the soil without digging, mapping hidden features across huge areas.
What kind of hidden features?
All sorts. We're finding previously unknown pits, post holes, ditches, other smaller monuments, pathways. Recently, they found evidence of a massive series of large pits arranged in an arc or circle miles across, potentially framing the Durrington Wall settlement. It reveals that Stonehenge wasn't an isolated structure, but the centerpiece of a much larger, complex ritual landscape, full of other timber and earthwork monuments, connected by avenues and pathways used over millennia.
So Stonehenge really doesn't stand alone. It's the absolute jewel, yes, but it's part of a whole necklace of sacred sites.
Beautifully put, yes. It's the heart of the Stonehenge and Avebury World Heritage Site, which recognizes this entire landscape. You've got other major sites nearby, like Woodhenge, a timber circle monument, Durrington Walls, which we know is this huge settlement and feasting site, possibly where the builders live seasonally, plus countless burial mounds, or barrows, like the concentration at Normanton Down overlooking Stonehenge. And then there's the Greater Cursus.
The cursus, that's that enormous, long, rectangular earthwork, right? Miles long.
That's the one. Nearly 2 miles long, about 100 yards wide. Its exact purpose is still debated, maybe a processional way, maybe defining a sacred boundary. But it predates the main stone circle, showing again how long this area was significant.
It paints a picture of a landscape actively used and shaped for ceremony and ritual for centuries, even millennia.
A sacred geography. And that connection between Stonehenge and the river Avon via the avenue reinforces this idea of movement and journeying within the landscape.
That idea of a procession, maybe symbolizing a journey from the world of the living, represented by timber structures like at Durrington Walls, down to the river, and then up the avenue to the world of the ancestors, represented by the stone circle.
That's a very popular and evocative interpretation, a transition from timber, representing life, to stone, representing permanence and eternity.
And preserving all this buried history is crucial, I imagine.
Hugely important. Much of the surrounding landscape has been plowed for centuries, which damages shallow archaeology. The National Trust, which owns much of the land, is doing fantastic work reverting arable land back to chalk grassland. This protects the buried archaeology they've identified over 60 sites benefiting already and restores the ancient habitat. And English Heritage, who manage the stones themselves, constantly work on conservation, managing erosion from visitors, ensuring the monument survives for the future.
It's good to know that work is happening, and it's amazing how Stonehenge continued to draw people long after the Bronze Age. You mentioned Roman finds.
Yes, Roman pottery and coins have been found at the site, suggesting it was still visited and perhaps held some significance even then. And of course, it enters recorded history in the medieval period, with writers like Geoffrey of Monmouth weaving it into Arthurian legends, wrongly attributing it to Merlin, but showing it was already a place of myth and wonder.
And even later figures left their mark.
Famously, Sir Christopher Wren, the architect of St. Paul's Cathedral, visited Stonehenge in the 17th century and even carved his name on one of the stones, something we definitely wouldn't encourage today.
Definitely not. But it shows its enduring pull. Yet, even with all this history, all this science, there are still huge mysteries standing, aren't there?
Oh, absolutely. It feels like every answer we find just chisels out 2 new questions.
Maybe a wonder was the plan all along.
Perhaps. I mean, one of the biggest questions is simply, why all the rebuilding? Why the drastic changes in design over centuries? Why the periods of apparent abandonment, like after the earthwork phase, or the unfinished Y and Z holes? What prompted these shifts in focus or belief?
We just don't know. And the lunar connection, we know it's there, but what was the exact role of lunar mathematics?
Right. Was the 18.6-year standstill cycle actively calculated and predicted using the station stones? Were the Aubrey holes used for some kind of eclipse prediction, as some have theorized? Or were the lunar alignments more symbolic, less computational? The exact code is still debated.
And then there's the sheer human logistics. We talked about the scale, but how?
Exactly. How did prehistoric leaders Without writing, without spreadsheets, without currency as we know it, how do they organize, finance, feed, and motivate these vast crews consistently for generations? What were the social and political structures that enabled such a colossal, long-term project? That remains a profound mystery about the societies themselves.
And perhaps the biggest question of all, was it truly conceived as a monument of unity?
That idea, bringing together people from Wales, Wiltshire, maybe Scotland, was it a deliberate political act, a peace pact between potentially competing groups, a shared religious sanctuary built to consolidate power or community on an island perhaps undergoing significant change, like those beaker migrations?
A statement in stone meant to unify.
It's the powerful and appealing idea, but proving intent across millennia. That's the challenge. These questions remind us that Stonehenge isn't just a static relic. It's a dynamic puzzle, still challenging us, still holding secrets.
It really is. Stonehenge is a calendar, a graveyard, a gathering drum. It ties Wales, Wessex, and Scotland in a single circle of stone. Its lintels bridge earth and sky. Its timeline bridges us and them, reminding that long before steel or silicon, human hands can still touch the cosmos. Thank you for being on this trip with us. Stay curious, stay grounded, and stay tuned for the next one.